Hey, what's going on, Reef Builders? I'm Evan Montgomery coming at you from the studio today. As many of you know, we just set up this Fat Cube 15-year-old used acrylic tank that we picked up and did quite a lot of work to get it to what it looks like today. Unfortunately, with some of this old live rock, there's quite a few pests on there, some vermitids and quite a few Aiptasia. Some of them are kind of mixed in amongst the zoanthids and kind of in a tricky spot. But today we're gonna just kind of show you real quick what we do for Aiptasia. It's really simple. It's kind of an injection method, but the chemical we use is a little bit different, a little more potent, and we have tremendous luck with it. Before we get into exactly how we do it manually with chemicals and some syringes and injecting them, we'll talk about a couple manual control things that are really like more of a complement to those. You're always going to probably have to kill some yourself manually, but some natural predators can really go a long ways in a tank. Peppermint shrimp, filefish, and copperband butterfly fish are the ones that most people come to mind for most people. In a small tank like this, peppermint shrimp really would be the best, because in a large tank you'd need a lot of them to fill in all the different corners and nooks and crannies in the rock. So in a small tank, a peppermint shrimp can really go a long way. Probably not going to eat all the big ones, at least right off the bat, but you know, they'll really prevent the spread, slow them down, get all the little tiny guys. They have a few drawbacks, the peppermint shrimp do. You know, they're kind of delicate. Some larger, more carnivorous fish might go eating them. They kind of hide a lot, so they're not always like the best decorative thing to have in a tank. You might not even see them except at night if you're really looking for them. They don't all eat Aiptasia quite as well as we would like. I think in my experience, the ones with the black tails or darker colored tails seem to be the best in my experience. By far one of the most commonly suggested remedies for Aiptasia, because if you get lucky with them, they do work quite well, is the copperband butterfly fish. We have one that we got super lucky with. It's the first one we tried. Eats Aiptasia like crazy, and it seems pretty hard. He gets along with the other fish and just kind of fits right into the community, no matter which tank we put him in. So he's kind of our worker fish. We'll move him from tank to tank, especially over here in the coral flats, and just let him really get into the egg crate on the frag racks and in all the nooks and crannies. They can be a little tricky to keep alive though and kind of get going in your tank. It seems like long term they don't really survive on Aiptasia, even if there's plenty of them to eat. They kind of need supplemental food from something else. Some mysis shrimp or something thrown in there occasionally will go a long way to keep them alive long term. And they also kind of have the downside of, you know, sometimes you have to get 2 or 3 of them before you get one that really stays alive for a long period of time in your tank. It's just really hard to keep them fat and happy. In my experiences at home too, I've had my yellow tang really go after new copperband butterfly fishes that I get. So the success I've had has been only when I use like an acclimation box, and I'll keep the copperband in there for up to a week or 2 so that they can kind of get to know each other and the copperband can settle in without too many other issues. But when you get a good one, they just cruise around the tank and they will eat every Aiptasia they can find. Copperband butterfly fish would really be ideally suited for a heavily dominated SPS tank, especially with Acropora. They're just not really fleshy enough for the copperband to even think twice about and really even look at. And they can kind of get in between the branches better than you can with a syringe or anything like that, and just really knock Aiptasia back quite a bit, especially in a coral flat like this. One of the more increasingly popular options for biological control of Aiptasia is the bristletail filefish. They're really a lot more hardy and easy to get going in your tank. A lot of them will eat flake food. We see ours picking at nori all the time, so they're not going to starve if they run out of Aiptasia or they can't find any more. But they really, kind of similar to copperbands, can develop a taste for corals and other things in your tank. So it's going to be hit or miss as far as that goes too, but they are a little more more slow moving, and you can kind of scoop them out of your tank probably easier than a copper band if you had to. Seems like they're becoming a lot more easy to come by these days because of captive breeding. I mean, I see them down at the local Petco all the time for little tiny guys that you might want to put a little guard on your Vortec before you get them, but we have one in either of these displays on my left and right because, you know, in the case of the mangrove cube over here, it's just a little too deep and wide for us to really get in there in the back corners and get all the Aiptasia manually. So this tank right here is a great example of, we tried to do a lot of manual removal, and there was just so many places underneath the rocks and kind of in the crevices of corals that we just really couldn't get to. So that's when we decided to introduce a bristletail filefish over here because, you know, they're a little bit more slow at eating Aiptasia. They're not going to be like a copper band just going zip, zip, zip around the tank and grabbing them all. So you might not think it's working right off the bat, but they're probably one of the most reliable fish to eat Aiptasia that we can think of. And that's why we have one in several of our systems. In this tank, we've tried peppermint shrimp and we still had Aiptasia. I'm sure they were eating a couple of the small ones, but they just really couldn't keep up. I'm sure if we just put a whole bunch more in there, it might have helped, but the bristletail filefish really knocks them out, you know, just knocks them out. They can go after corals like I was just mentioning, but they're kind of binary in that. Some of them will eat corals and some of them won't. Recommended for sure to also have a good screen top on the tank. They can kind of go flying sometimes. We really do our best with the manual removal as best we can, especially in a new tank like the Fat Cube we just set up over on the other side of the studio here. But at the end of the day, we kind of both have a feeling that we're going to end up putting a filefish in there to really do the job. There's some big fat ones in there that'll be easy for us to just snipe real quick, but to really like long-term take care of it and not have to worry about it again, a filefish is probably in that tank's future. All right, we're back over here at the Fat Cube that we just set up, and one of the first steps that we wanted to take care of before we start putting some of our precious corals in here and filling the rockscape up with all kinds of fun stuff, we have to get rid of some of the Aiptasia. You know, I just said we're going to put a filefish in here eventually, but it really is best to take care of the obvious ones first. So let's see, here's a good example of a couple. They're kind of in some zoanthids, so these are going to be a little tricky. Luckily, zoanthids are quite hardy, and if they get a little bit of the chemical on them, it's not going to probably be the end of the world, but with more sensitive corals, you'd probably want to watch out for that. We've got a few more. Where'd they go? Yep, down in here, nooks and crannies. We're just going to get the higher up ones today because they're easy to reach, and then we'll get the lower down ones kind of off camera. Where's the other one that we were looking at here? Yeah, zoom in right there, that guy. So he's going down here in just a couple minutes, and we'll show you how we do it. So I think between Jake and I, we've tried probably every commercially available Aiptasia product on the market, but the most effective one we have found by far is sodium hydroxide. And I have to admit, the first time I tried it in my own tank at home, I was a little bit nervous and thought I might have messed it up, but this is what it's sold. It's actually sold as drain cleaner most commonly, although there's many commercial purposes for it where you can pick it up from local hardware stores. As long as it says 100% sodium hydroxide on there, this actually says food grade, and it lists some of the purposes you could use it for among clearing out your drain. Cast iron cleaning, aluminum etching, and pretzels and bagels, funny enough. So I guess you could use it to make some food at some point. But when you mix this up, it has a super high pH. I want to say even higher than Kalkwasser. It's probably pegging the scale. And if you were to mix some of this up in water and dump it in your tank, for sure you'd have a really bad day. So say you were to mix up even just a small amount of this and fully dissolve it in water and it wasn't a saturated solution, then if you tried to use that in your tank, it would kind of just go everywhere. If you mix it super concentrated the way we do, I think we put about a tablespoon into just a small little cup of water like this, then it's super saturated, and when you actually use it in the tank, it doesn't dissolve immediately. It kind of congeals is not the word, but it almost turns into like a gel-like substance and stays in one place. Or yeah, precipitate, I guess that's the word for it. And it does kind of stay in one place. Obviously important to turn off all the flow in your tank before you do anything like this, and you want to probably leave the flow off for 15 to 20 minutes depending on how much you use. So it is time for an important disclaimer too with the sodium hydroxide. It's a caustic chemical. If you get it on your skin, it's not good. If you overdo it, it's, you know, if you spill it on your carpet, it's not going to be a fun day. So if you're not comfortable handling stuff like that, or maybe you have young kids around and you don't want a jar of lye sitting around, then it's probably best to stick with a lot of the commercially available Aiptasia products. They come with some of the same risks, but it's generally a lot safer. They've been diluted down and they work almost just as well. So, you know, we're really getting down to business and we want to take care of them once and not have them come back. That's why we do it this way. But if you're not comfortable with that, you know, just try something else at first and see how far that gets you. So it should kind of go without saying, just like any additive or chemical that you use around your tank, you don't want to knock it in. So it's really important to just set it somewhere that's not on top of your tank. So if you do have an accident, mishap, it doesn't get spilled in your tank. This batch that we've mixed up here is quite viscous. So when I stick the syringe in and pull the plunger up, it takes a little while for the liquid to catch up. And then when you pull the syringe out, it's got a little bit on the outside that you just want to rinse off. This is just some tap water here. So we'll step up on the ladder, and I'm not sure how good the angle's going to be here, but I think I can just reach down and slowly kind of stab and press the syringe, and you can see that white precipitate building up there, and that's all it takes. Obviously we have the flow off in the tank already, so you can see a couple little chunks floating around. I've actually even seen my fish eat those chunks and never had any problems to speak of from that. All right, I see another one that's just within reach here, so that'll be easy enough to get. If I can get on my tippy toes here. And you can stab them, even if they retreat into the rock a little bit, you can kind of just fill that hole in with a little bit more, then they'll suffocate in there. That guy's not coming back. I see another easy target right here, just about as deep as the last one, so I think this should be pretty easy to just give them a little stab and fill that hole in with the sodium hydroxide. It's easier in this tank. You can see a couple of the chunks of precipitate falling down. Since there's not that many corals, it's not too much to worry about yet. If you have a lot of Aiptasia in and around your corals, you know, like I just said, try not to get it on them as much as possible, especially with some of the more sensitive SPS type corals or clams or something like that. But here we have some right in the middle of a patch of zoanthids, and zoanthids are pretty tough. I'm sure when I go for these Aiptasia that the zoanthids will react, but we've done this several times on different patches of zoanthids and they've always been all right. So let's just get this guy here. A little stab in action there. Get him good. Here's another good one right there. Try not to get the zoanthids, but if a little bit gets around the base of them, they'll be all right. Another one in the back. This is a nice little forest of Aiptasia to mow down. Even if you just get it close to them, it's caustic enough. It really does not take much of this. You can see I've used about half of that syringe and we've already gotten a handful of them. I think we're gonna stop there for today. You know, you don't have to get all the Aiptasia at one time in one day, in one session. It's okay to take your time, just get a couple, not overwhelm your tank with the sodium hydroxide, and then just really start with the big ones, you know. And even in a new tank, especially in a new tank, actually, it's really, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's really hard to avoid Aiptasia getting in your tank. I've personally never had a Aiptasia-free system in my life, but if you get ahead of them before they get out of control, that helps a lot. Especially, yeah, start with the big ones. It almost seems like they're magic sometimes though. They spring up out of nowhere. Really easy for them to come in on a frag plug or something, even if you inspect it and don't see it. If you already have Aiptasia and you feel like you might be going down a road where it's going to be a bad infestation, and especially if you already have a bad infestation, obviously knock them back with something that eats them or manually. But the best thing you can do is feed less. Usually if a tank has a lot of Aiptasia, you're feeding too much or broadcast feeding too much coral food. You know, they're not living off of nothing. They need to eat just like all other animals, and that really is the source of the problem. Ultimately, is too much food. If there was an easy solution to Aiptasia, we wouldn't have to deal with them anymore in this hobby. We would have dealt with it a long time ago if it was an easy solution. Odds are none of these will work individually, whether it be manual removal or biological control. An attack from all sides is kind of the best option because, you know, say a fish can get up where you can't reach a syringe, and a fish might not eat the big ones that are so easy to take care of with a syringe. So it's kind of an ongoing battle. You just got to stick with it and try not to let it get out of control. In the same vein as this, our next video is going to be about some of the uglies in a tank, kind of how to combat algae and especially in a new tank, prevent it from cropping up in the first place. And until that video, make sure you subscribe, throw some comments, questions down in the comments section, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you on the next one.